The gloves are off. Biden mocks Sanders. Again, mocks the notion of a political revolution. I want to talk about it because this is one of the most incoherent speeches that I've heard up to this point, asked by one Joy Ann Reid. Let's get into what Joe Biden is talking about here, because even though I think I understand what he's talking about, it is all over the place. And incoherent is me putting it nicely. Welcome to the Soapbox. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I am not at my normal abode. I am in Alabama. I'm in Alabama. My wife is visiting her dad, so I'm going to be here for the week. By the way, if you guys enjoy the content, you dig what I'm putting down, please consider liking, sharing, and of course, supporting the content through PayPal or Patreon. They have been going after us, meaning YouTube and this demonetization stuff. So please consider helping the content or the channel. I'm in Bama country, and I've had this odd experience of, I think today alone, having maybe 5 people stop me to have a conversation. Now, I'm from the South, and that's not necessarily entirely unheard of in Richmond, but it is kind of unheard of in Richmond for it happened to be that much. I've been engaged in conversations all over the place. Now, I'm a chatterbox, so this is perfectly up my alley. I just noticed there's a lot of it, and I've only been here for like a day. Let's get to the news. So Joe Biden is apparently at the Poor People's Campaign, and Joe Biden has asked a question. This question was asked by one Joy Ann Reid. I just wanted to make sure that I looked at this video. I've watched this video. I even read the article with the video. But sometimes you do this and you get farther into it and you never look at the date. But the date is on point. I wanted to make sure this wasn't something that took place in the past. Joe Biden has asked a question. Joe Biden has asked a question by Joy Ann Reid. This question essentially boils down to, how are you going to work with Republicans? If you remember, Joe Biden was mercilessly mocked, even by people part of his own party, meaning not people like me who dislike Joe Biden, but people who are within the context of the Democratic Party who would be happy, ecstatic to vote for Joe Biden, just like they were ecstatic to vote for Hillary Clinton. Even they, when Joe Biden said he could work with Republicans and that they cut it out when he gets in office, they scoffed. What? How are you part of the... How did you go 8 years with Obama and come away from that experience with, if it was another 4 years, they would have totally worked it out? Not so much. But she asked him a question on this. How are you going to work with Republicans? And in this answer, it sounds like they've been trying to deal with, it sounds like within the context of his political meanderings, the talking within the context of what they do in their own party, the political think, that they have identified that they have a weakness on this notion of centrist. That centrist has become somewhat of a dirty word, somewhat of a slur. Established centrist. It's talking about the wealth, the fat of the party. This aspect of the party that is undetached, completely detached from the needs and the wants and the aspirations of most human beings within society itself. Detached. How do you deal with that? I mean, after all, Hillary suffered from that particular issue where they thought she was detached, hubris, militarist, that this was somewhat of a slur, dirty word, corporate candidate. How do you deal with it? It sounds like they're trying to come up with a strategy to deal with that and a messaging for it. I'm going to let you hear what they have so far. This is still a work in progress, apparently, hopefully. Well, not hopefully, because I want Biden to lose. But this is clearly still a work in progress. Let's hear Joe Biden answer a question from Joy Ann Reid on how are you going to work with the opposing side. Let's see.
We, the people, we hold these truths self-evident.
Okay, wait, let's start here. All right.
Votes. Would you try to persuade? Doesn't mean you can.
In fact, let me read you the question specifically, because I don't want you to think that I'm making this up. That's how bad this answer is. All right. So, all right. Biden's comment came in an answer to a question from Joy Ann Reid about how he believed he could work with congressional Republicans should he win the White House in 2020. That's the question. All right. Let's hear Biden do his thing.
Try to persuade. Doesn't mean you can do it all the time, but it kept us from going into depression. And so, folks, look, if you start off with the notion there's nothing you can do, well, why don't you all go home then, man? Or let's start a real physical revolution if you're talking about it. Because we have to be able to change what we're doing within our system. Because you talk about the creed. We the people, we hold these truths self-evident. We haven't always lived up to that standard, but we've never fully abandoned it. And the moment we abandon it, we lose everything we stand for nationally and internationally in terms of the power of our persuasion. The reason why the rest of the world follows us and we're secure is not because we have the largest military in the world. It's because we not only lead by the power, the example of our power, but the power of our example.
What the hell is Biden talking about? I will play this again because I think I understand what he's talking about. A lot of this, part of it is propaganda, part of it is nonsense. But let's hear him again. And it seems like this is a large, this is a big jump to take a swipe at the term revolution. But let's keep going. I mean, and even then, it's somewhat of a straw man. Let's hear him out. Give him the benefit of the doubt one more time, Biden.
Would you try to persuade? Doesn't mean you can do it all the time, but it kept us from going into depression. And so, folks, look, if you start off with the notion there's nothing you can do, well, why don't you all go home then, man? Or let's start a real physical revolution if you're talking about it. Because we have to be able to change what we're doing within our system. Because you talk about the creed. We the people, we hold these truths self-evident. We haven't always lived up to that standard, but we've never fully abandoned it. And the moment we abandon it, we lose everything we stand for nationally and internationally in terms of the power of our persuasion. The reason why the rest of the world follows us and we're secure is not because we have the largest military in the world. It's because we not only lead by the power, the example of our power, but the power of our example. And you can shame people to do things the right way.
Just so we're clear, Joe Biden was the vice president in a White House that literally and completely destroyed a country where the first African-American president has this ignoble reputation or this ignoble legacy of them selling slaves in that country after his actions. That's, including this coup in Honduras that these guys pretended wasn't a coup at all. I have to be honest, that this speech is lunacy. The leading by example is that we've never, we haven't necessarily always held up to that standard. You believe you lived up to it within the context of your White House? I mean, you can say you had allies, fair enough. And you can say that Donald Trump has lost many of those allies again. Fair enough. But let's also be clear. You guys have a lot of blood on your hands. And I'm sorry, this is another, this is Hillary Clinton with pants. A few things. It sounds like, and I could be completely wrong, but it sounds like he's making this argument between apathy, he said you give up and go home, or revolution, meaning essentially things go in the pot. People just tearing shit and burning down. Those are the two extremes that he's talking about. The revolution in this point, of course, he's talking about Sanders. I don't know who else he'd be talking about. That's somewhat of an odd thing that he's not. He said, why don't you go start a physical revolution then? Again, that sounds like a hit on Sanders. Sanders keeps saying he wants a political revolution. He wants a political revolution. He wants a political revolution. It's an odd thing to say, go start a physical revolution. Why are you telling him to go start a physical revolution? He told you what he wanted. He wants a situation where people all across the United States get up and start asserting the country that they want. That's what he wants. How can you not want that if you're a member of this particular country and you think this country has gone off the rails? I don't understand the fight against this. Now, his point is centrism. Now, this notion that but it has to be. I don't know what else his point could be. Between apathy, centrism. The problem with this argument is it's somewhat of a straw man. Bernie Sanders calling for a political revolution and saying you Medicare for all. If 70% of the country wants it, how the hell is that radical? If the majority of the country is for Social Security, if the majority of the country is for expansion of social education, meaning free public colleges, if the majority of the country is for those things, then how are they radical propositions? It is something to be said to say you want a political revolution. You want a situation where people stand up and start asserting it's pitchforks or it's dollars. This person here, who's screaming at the height of his lungs about centrism, is representing dollars. Sit down. Be a centrist. We got it under control. You don't need a political revolution in this case. And it's not even a political revolution because he's strawmanning Sanders with this particular argument. Sanders gave a speech defining what democratic socialism was. And not just what it was, because what it is to some degree subjective. He explained it in the context that he meant it, which was FDR. FDR was a capitalist. FDR said as much. And I got to be honest, Sanders, any socialist that you talk to will scoff at the notion that Bernie Sanders is a socialist. Bernie Sanders has been very clear in what he believes on this point. He hasn't said he wants people to burn down stuff. He hasn't said he wants to nationalize railroads or the energy grid. He hasn't said any of those things. I've said those things. But that being said, it's a straw man. It's a straw man. The people of this country can assert that they want a different country. And having somebody who's a figurehead for that and can be the conduit in a political space for it is a beneficial thing. As it is the first time in my lifetime where something like that was possible. Joe Biden talking about revolution, that's nonsense. I hate this video. I hate this video because I understand it's political messaging and everything else, but it's political messaging done in a way, yes, it's a straw man. Yes, it's incoherent. And yes, it misses the point in some way because there are some people who fall into this notion of apathy. And there are some people who want this thing of revolution. But within the context of that scale, what Bernie Sanders wants is mid-range. They cast him as kind of out there and radical because he calls himself socialist, and he is to the left of the people in the race, and he is one of those people that actually means it, and he does, when he's talking about Green New Deal, or he's talking about education, or talking about economic, he means it. Everybody knows he means it. Everybody knows he means it. Joe Biden just wants to be president. This part, he doesn't care, which is why this is incoherent. They probably told him the messaging on this. They probably told him to hit this notion of a revolution. They probably told him to scream about centrism and try to change the language of centrism and try to change the way people perceive centrism and all this other stuff and try to use centrism within the context of Sanders. And it came out like this. It came out like this. Joe Biden takes a swipe at Sanders. I don't know how people argue with the political revolution stuff. I mean, maybe from a political stance, you hit it. But think about what you're hitting. Think about what you're hitting. The public itself says, the public itself was so beaten down at the end of the Obama administration that they chose Donald Trump. How on earth do you have that legacy, meaning Trump comes after you, and then somebody as a vestige of the previous administration that yielded Trump runs? And his argument that he was running for after the election of Trump, after the election of a guy who was anti-establishment, and after the establishment candidates, all of them lost. Every last one of them. All of them. And I'm talking about from the Republican Party and going to some degree in the Democratic Party because Hillary Clinton lost. And the person that they decided to put up as another centrist. Well, try it again. It was the Russians. She didn't lose on all merits. It was the Russians. And so they run Joe Biden. And Joe Biden, after hearing one of the candidates make an argument that the people needs to start getting involved in the political process because nothing changes unless people start pressing on the political process, and Joe Biden rolling this is to mock that and say, go start a real physical revolution. Nobody says anything about physical revolution. Nobody even says burn stuff down. But this notion of people getting involved into the political process, I have a hard time figuring out how you argue with that proposition. And yet, and still, that does seem to be the thing that Joe Biden is arguing against. The swipe at Sanders. And, you know, the wild part about this, they're at the poor people's campaign. This corporatist is at the poor people's campaign. This corporatist would do nothing for the people at this poor people's campaign. And yet there he is. There he is. Taking a swipe at the guy who would. Astonishing. Astonishing. I'm not going to keep this video long. There's somebody made a comment. Balthazar. He acts like he has overcome huge political obstacles. His 2008 competition was Sarah Fing Palin. Yes, Sarah effing Palin. And his 2012 competition was Paul Biceps Ryan. Not just that, Joe Biden has been running for the presidency for the last, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? One time he gets put out of the race because of plagiarism charges. He gets into this race and does the exact same thing with the plagiarism. And then for the last other times he lost. Nobody wanted him. And for whatever reason, he now believes that, this is his chance. Fair enough. Do you, boo? Do you, boo? Ryan for Prez. Biden looks out for the audience and thinks poor people. Poor people. In more ways than one. Bernie's agenda is rainbow colored. It's a people's agenda. It is. It is. Which makes this all the more sick. That Joe Biden is here attacking the guy that would actually help these poor people. When they know damn well Joe Biden wouldn't do a goddamn thing for them. That's the irony of this. That's why politics is disgusting. A person can get up there and say stuff like that, knowing they're not on his agenda. There's nothing that Biden said in this that had any value. I mean, listen to it. It's just rhetoric.
Would you try to persuade? Doesn't mean you can do it all the time, but it kept us from going into depression. And so, folks, look, if you start off with the notion there's nothing you can do, well, might you all go home then, man? Or let's start a real physical revolution if you're talking about it. Because we have to be able to change what we're doing within our system because...
I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. Do you know what that means? He says, you can just give up then. I don't know who he's talking to, but okay. You can just give up then. Oh, he means talking to Republicans. You can just give up then. Or you can go start a real physical revolution. Well, what about a political revolution? Is that an option? Does it have to be a physical one? What about a political one? I mean, can we, before going there, can we go with the political? Because I guess my point is, this is talking about something that's not positive. Saying go start a real physical revolution. Why are you telling me that? Why are you telling me that? Why are you telling me that? I mean, it just seems so overt as a hit for Sanders. But I don't fully know what that means. I guess he's saying if you just give up, you can either give up in the sense of trying to work with Republicans, or you could burn it down. But nobody's positing either one of those. Nobody's positing either one. Look, Sanders has been very specific with the notion of a political revolution. And he's also been very specific in the objectives that he wanted to accomplish. And his very point is basic. Your world changes when you get involved in the process and believe it can change and push for it to change. That's it. That's simple. That basic. Nobody says it's easy. Nobody says it happens overnight. Nobody says it's not a siege war of sorts, of people pushing themselves against the institution over and over and over and over again. It's always a lift. It's no magic door. It's somewhat disturbing that Joe Biden is essentially screaming centrism at the height of his lungs. That's what it sounds like. I could be wrong. Using a straw man to do it. Apathy and burning it down. Again, I ask, whispering from the crowd, what about a political revolution? What about getting people involved in the political process? What about pushing on Republicans? What about getting them out of office? What about those options? Joe Biden doesn't posit that option. Joe Biden posits two extremes, neither of which has been posited by anybody. I'll end this here because unfortunately, I have a lot more videos. I am tired. This has been a long day. But, God damn it, we're going to do the news. And we're going to do it together. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the patron. And I will see you in... That's a small one I want to do. It's about 10 minutes. I'll see you shortly. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.